putting aside questions of Michael Wolff as a journalist, that rings true to people who've spent time over the last year talking to people working inside this White House, and that is, I think, a chilling portrait for a lot of people because, as I say, these are not Democrats, they're not liberals, they're not people who want to destroy Donald Trump, they're the people who are closest to him.
Well, it's down in print now, and this is something, again, that most journalists working in Washington, D.C., most people that have been talking to Republicans on Capitol Hill have heard. He's a child. He's got no attention span. He reads nothing. Bob Corker saying they're running an adult daycare center there. That sort of talk that you've heard from senior Republicans has actually now been confirmed in this book by a lot of people. But we've all heard it, but nobody had the guts to say it on the record. And, of course, some people are going to push back. If you're Katie Walsh, what are you going to say if you're quoted saying he acts like a child? Of course, there are going to be people that are going to say, oh, no, I didn't say that way, or no. But it rings true. And whether Katie Walsh said it or not, which I'm sure she did, but if she didn't, 30 other people didn't. You have the Gary Cohn memo, also absolutely devastating, but only saying things that we've all heard about before. We'll get back to that portion in a second. But Jeremy Bash, I want to go to you, and let's just talk about the law. Let's just talk about the prosecution. If you're a prosecutor and you're looking at this situation, you are looking at a cast of characters that one by one are turning on the President of the United States and all the President's men and all of the President's women. Right now, it's looking like of the loyalists that were around Donald Trump, it's now boiled down to basically Trump and his children who are still loyal to him. What impact of having the National Security Advisor who spent more time with him on planes campaigning in 2016 and was seen as the guy that Trump trusted to have around him the most, now cooperating with the feds? What does it mean to have the campaign manager now, of course, in trouble with the feds, possibly facing a lifetime in jail? What does it mean when you have one of his top foreign policy guys now cooperating with the FBI, and now you have his final campaign manager, his top political strategist, accusing the president and all the president's men and women of treason? What does that do for the prosecutor?
Yeah, first and foremost, there is no loyalty within the Trump inner circle, and that's clear by Bannon's comments in this account, even if, as John and others noted, only 20% is accurate. So the prosecutor can pick apart different insiders, play them against each other, and really, Joe, I think Donald Trump's world pivoted and turned for the worse on December 3rd of last year when Mike Flynn pleaded guilty, because on that day, a member of his most inner circle, one of his longtime loyalists, someone who the president tried to show loyalty towards, he turned state's evidence and is now cooperating, offering evidence and testimony against the president. And to your point earlier, Joe, Bannon clearly gave this interview, or these series of interviews, before December 3rd. So whether he knew the president was, quote, going down or not, he knew something a long time before Mike Flynn even pleaded guilty. And so I think this is this does not augur well for the president's legal strategy. And I think the thing that Bannon does have a first-hand knowledge of is the firing of Comey. And I'm sure Bob Mueller is going to be talking to him and many others around him about what he saw, what he knows about that specific issue.
And Casey Hunt, we've been watching over the past month a sad and pathetic display, my words, obviously not yours, because you have to work with these people, from some junior Republican members of the House to try to besmirch the reputation of the FBI, try to attack Bob Mueller, try to claim that this is nothing but a witch hunt. You now have Steve Bannon, a guy that they all would have had their arms around and had their thumbs up taking pictures 2 days ago. Now Steve Bannon is talking about treason. What is the impact on, well, not just this, but also the news that it was Papadopoulos's loose lips that actually started the FBI investigation and not what Jim Jordan and others were claiming before? What does all of this news do to their pathetic attempt to attack the men and women of the FBI? And what's been the White House response?
Well, Joe, I think that that's clearly what the thing that is most animating the president and the White House, whether it's from an emotional or a practical perspective. I mean, this Russia investigation has been the thing hanging over the president of the United States, and now all of a sudden one of his top advisors has given it more credibility. So, of course, late last night, a lawyer for President Trump and his campaign sent a cease and desist letter to former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon. The letter accuses Bannon of breaching his employment agreement with the campaign by communicating with author Michael Wolff about Trump and his family, disclosing confidential information, and, quote, making disparaging and in some cases outright defamatory statements to Wolff about Trump, his family members, and the Trump campaign. Trump attorney Charles Harder said that Bannon's actions, quote, give rise to numerous legal claims, including defamation by libel and slander, and breach of his written confidentiality and non-disparagement agreement with clients. Legal action, he says, is imminent. The Trump campaign has threatened legal action without following through on multiple occasions previously, including against the New York Times and in October 2016 against women accusing then-candidate Trump of sexual misconduct. Bannon so far has not responded to those developments overnight. But, of course, earlier in the day, the president responded in a blistering statement about Steve Bannon. He says, quote, Steve Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency. When he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. And now that he's on his own, Steve is learning that winning isn't as easy as I make it look. Steve had very little to do with our historic victory, which was delivered by the forgotten men and women of this country. Yet Steve had everything to do with the loss of a Senate seat in Alabama. Steve doesn't represent my base. He's only in it for himself. Steve pretends to be at war with the media. Yet he spent his time at the White House leaking false information to the media to make himself seem far more important than he was. It is the only thing he does well. Steve was rarely in one-on-one meeting with me and only pretends to have had influence to fool a few people with no access and no clue, whom he helped write phony books. Like me, many Republicans love the United States of America and are helping to finally take our country back and build it up, rather than simply seeking to burn it all down. Joe, when I read that statement yesterday, I've never seen anything like it.
No, never seen anything like it. I don't really know where to start. Of course, it's not, if only somebody had warned him about taking Steve Bannon into the White House. If only someone had warned him about letting Michael Flynn be his national security advisor. Well, I'll just stop there. This is a line I love the most, Nick Confessori. Donald Trump attacking Steve Bannon, saying, quote, he's only in it for himself. I got one of those Chris Matthews laugh. That is so rich. He's only in it for himself. And yesterday, apparently, lawyers in Washington, D.C. were able to get their clients to waste a lot of money. Manafort now suing Bob Mueller. Lots of luck on that fella, and lots of luck on Donald Trump suing Steve Bannon. You can talk about that, or what's your bigger takeaway on all the news that came flooding out yesterday?
Well, Joe, you know, I'm thinking of that scene in The Godfather where Fredo is out fishing and somebody cuts his neck from behind. So when I read that statement from the president, that's the first thing I thought of. I have never seen anything in presidential politics that is remotely like that anywhere. It's astonishing. This is a president, in Wolff's telling, who is surrounded by people who hate him and hate each other and don't respect him. It is hard to imagine the first 6 months or a year of a White House with that level of open disdain for the guy in the Oval Office. And it is impossible for a presidency to function in those conditions. And, of course, we are seeing that this presidency does not really function in an orderly way. It's very good news for Bob Mueller, by the way. And if he wants to kind of peel his people apart and turn them against each other, he has a lot to work with.
Boy, he has a lot to work with. And you're talking about the White House, and for those of us that have been